The fires of Troy still roared into the night sky, smoke rising like the breath of angry gods. Amid the ruins, Odysseus stood silent, his eyes heavy with triumph and sorrow. The Trojan War was won, but he knew deep inside that the gods would not let him return home easily. Behind him, the cries of the conquered mixed with the clang of fading battle, while the Greek warriors gathered their plunder. His heart longed for Ithaca, his wife Penelope, and his infant son Telemachus, but the journey would become a trial beyond mortal reckoning. As dawn broke over the smoldering city, Odysseus gathered his companions. He lifted his sword to the heavens, swearing by Zeus and Poseidon that he would see Ithaca again. The men roared in unison, their voices echoing across the still battlefield. But in the shadows, the gods whispered among themselves, plotting trials that would test his resolve, his cunning, and his soul. 12 ships unfurled their sails as the wind filled them, the Greek banners snapping in the breeze. Odysseus stood at the prow of his black ship, watching the horizon with hope and unease. The sea shimmered with promise, but beneath its surface, dangers stirred. The men laughed, drank, and sang songs of victory, unaware that fate had only just begun to tighten its grip upon them. Dark clouds gathered without warning. The sea, once calm, rose into towering waves. Lightning split the heavens as Poseidon, god of the sea, revealed his wrath. The ships rocked violently, timbers creaking under the fury. Odysseus gripped the mast, defiance burning in his eyes. He had blinded Poseidon's son, and now the god of oceans would haunt every league of his voyage. The storm tossed them ashore upon the land of the Ciconies. Exhausted but hungry, the Greeks raided the villages, seizing food and gold. But their greed awakened fierce resistance. The Ciconies gathered their warriors, riding swift chariots, and struck back with merciless strength. Blood stained the sands, and Odysseus, though victorious, mourned the heavy losses among his crew. After the battle, Odysseus chastised his men for their recklessness. They had lingered too long, drunk on plunder, and paid with comrades' lives. That night, he sat by the shore, staring at the sea. The cost of pride weighed upon him, yet the horizon called him onward. The stars glimmered like distant beacons, guiding him to both peril and destiny. The ships drifted to a strange island where gentle winds carried the scent of flowers. The natives offered the men lotus fruits, sweet and intoxicating. One bite, and the sailors forgot Ithaca, forgot war, forgot everything but endless dream-like bliss. Odysseus, with iron will, dragged his entranced crew back to the ships, tying them down until the spell passed. A looming cave opened in a cliffside, filled with the stench of sheep and smoke. Against his instincts, Odysseus led his men inside, seeking food and shelter. But soon, the earth shook with the steps of Polyphemus, the one-eyed giant, son of Poseidon. His massive shadow filled the cavern, and the men trembled like trapped birds before a hawk. The Cyclops blocked the cave with a boulder too massive for mortal hands to move. His single eye glowed in the firelight as he devoured 2 of Odysseus's men raw, their screams echoing in the night. Fear gripped the crew, but Odysseus's mind spun with cunning. He knew brute strength would not save them, only guile. Odysseus stepped forward, his voice steady as he offered Polyphemus a gift, a wineskin filled with rich, dark wine. The giant drank deeply, his laughter booming as the drink dulled his senses. "Tell me your name, little man," Polyphemus growled, his voice thick with drink. Odysseus answered with a sly smile, "My name is Nobody." The trap had begun. When the Cyclops fell into a drunken sleep, his snores shaking the cavern walls, Odysseus struck. With a sharpened wooden stake hardened in the fire, he and his men drove the weapon into the giant's single eye. Polyphemus roared, thrashing in agony, the cavern quaking with his screams. The men clung to the shadows, their hearts pounding as the giant groped blindly for them. At dawn, Polyphemus rolled away the boulder to let his sheep graze, his blinded eye burning with fury. Odysseus had bound his men beneath the bellies of the animals, clutching tight as the flock moved past their captor. One by one, the men slipped into the light of freedom, Odysseus the last to escape, his mind racing with both fear and triumph. Safe aboard their ships, the men rowed furiously away from the cursed island. But Odysseus could not resist pride. Standing on the deck, he shouted back to Polyphemus, revealing his true name. "It was I, Odysseus of Ithaca, who blinded you." The giant howled and prayed to Poseidon, his father, to curse the wanderer's journey with endless torment. From the depths of the sea, Poseidon heard his son's cry. The god of earthquakes and oceans rose in fury, his trident striking the waters. Waves towered over the fleet as thunder split the heavens. From that moment, Poseidon swore to keep Odysseus from home for years uncounted, hurling obstacle after obstacle in his path. At last, the battered fleet found refuge on the floating isle of Aeolus, master of winds. In a golden hall, Aeolus welcomed Odysseus, feasting him and hearing his tale. Moved by his plight, Aeolus gifted him a great ox-hide sack, tied with silver cord, within which all the adverse winds were bound, leaving only the gentle breeze toward Ithaca. For 9 days the ships sped homeward, Ithaca's shores nearly in sight, but curiosity consumed the weary sailors. Believing the sack to hold treasure, they loosed its cord. Instantly, the imprisoned winds burst forth, shrieking across the sea. The ships were hurled back into endless waters, Odysseus collapsing in despair as his home vanished again into the horizon. Their wandering brought them to the land of the Laestrygonians, a race of giant cannibals. At first, the men approached with hope, but soon the monsters attacked, hurling boulders and spears like storms of death. Ships were smashed in the harbor, crews devoured alive. Only Odysseus's vessel escaped, his men rowing frantically from the nightmare. At last, the weary survivors reached a lush island where wild animals prowled, yet strangely tame, bowing to unseen power. In a grand hall stood Circe, the sorceress, radiant and dangerous. With sweet words and enchanted wine, she lured Odysseus's men, then with a wave of her staff, transformed them into squealing swine, their cries echoing through marble walls. One man, Eurylochus, escaped the enchantress's grasp and fled back to Odysseus. Gasping, he revealed the fate of their companions. Odysseus's heart burned with fury, yet he steeled himself to face the witch alone. Armed not with brute force, but with cunning, he set forth toward her palace, a mortal man preparing to confront divine sorcery. Before Odysseus reached Circe's doors, a radiant figure appeared. Hermes, messenger of the gods. With a sly smile, Hermes handed him a magical herb called moly, its black root and white blossom shining with power. With this her spells shall fail, Hermes warned. Strengthened, Odysseus strode into the sorceress's hall, destiny tightening around him. Odysseus entered Circe's radiant hall, where his men, now swine, squealed in pens. The sorceress welcomed him with enchanting beauty, her eyes shimmering like traps of desire. She offered him her cup, rich with poison and spellcraft. But when he drank, the magic faltered, broken by Hermes' gift. Drawing his sword, Odysseus demanded his men be restored. Circe, startled yet intrigued, lowered her staff. Circe, struck by Odysseus's defiance, bowed her head in respect. With a chant, she waved her staff, and one by one, the men returned to their human forms, collapsing in confusion and relief. Then, to Odysseus's surprise, Circe embraced him not as foe, but as a lover. For a year, he and his men feasted in her halls, forgetting the pull of the sea, forgetting Ithaca. Time slipped like sand through fingers. Days turned to nights of feasting, laughter, and music. Yet beneath the revelry, Odysseus's heart grew restless. He longed for Penelope's steadfast gaze, for Telemachus's embrace. In Circe's paradise, he was both king and prisoner, torn between love and duty, between luxury and the call of home. At last, Odysseus resolved to continue his journey. Circe, solemn now, told him his path must lead first into the realm of Hades. There, among shadows and spirits, he would seek the prophet Tiresias, who alone could reveal the way home. The men shuddered at her words, for no mortal journeyed to the land of the dead and returned. With heavy hearts, the men prepared their ship once more. Circe's isle faded behind them as they sailed into waters where light seemed to die. The sea grew cold, the sky dimmed, and an eerie silence replaced the cries of gulls. They sailed not toward life, but toward death itself, guided by dread and destiny. They reached the land where no sun shines, a shore of endless mist. Odysseus drew his blade and dug a pit in the earth. Into it, he poured honey, milk, and blood of sacrificed sheep, calling the dead to rise. His men trembled as pale shadows gathered, the veil between life and death breaking before their eyes. Among the spirits appeared Elpenor, a comrade lost at Circe's halls, who had fallen from her roof in drunken sleep. His shade wept, begging Odysseus to return and give him proper burial rites. Odysseus's heart ached with guilt, for he had left his friend unburied. He swore to honor him, even as shadows pressed closer. Then came Tiresias, blind prophet of Thebes, bearing his staff even in death. He drank of the blood and spoke with a voice like thunder rolling through caverns. "Poseidon will hound you, wanderer," he warned. "Yet if you restrain your men from the cattle of Helios, you may reach Ithaca. Fail, and ruin shall fall upon all." Next appeared Agamemnon, once commander of the Greek host. His spirit burned with grief and rage as he told of his murder at the hands of his wife Clytemnestra and her lover. "Trust not even in women," he warned bitterly. Odysseus's heart clenched, for he thought of Penelope and prayed her love remain true. Then rose Achilles, the greatest warrior of Troy. His shade towered, yet his words were heavy with sorrow. "I would rather be a slave upon the earth than king among the dead," he lamented. The men trembled at his grief, and Odysseus bowed his head in silence, understanding the cruel truth of mortality. Leaving the land of the dead, Odysseus's men rode with haunted eyes, the voices of spirits still echoing in their ears. The sea once more carried them back to Circe's isle, where Odysseus fulfilled his promise. He built a pyre and honored Elpenor with sacred rites. Smoke rose into the heavens, carrying the soul of their fallen comrade to peace. Circe greeted them once more, her beauty shadowed with sorrow. She spoke of trials yet to come, the deadly sirens whose song lured sailors to destruction, the twin terrors of Scylla and Charybdis, and the sacred cattle of Helios that must never be harmed. Her words carried weight, and Odysseus's men felt fear like a chill in their bones. When the black ship reached Siren waters, Odysseus prepared. He filled his sailors' ears with beeswax, but he himself longed to hear their forbidden song. Bound tightly to the mast, he strained against the ropes as the sirens' voices rose, sweet and deadly, promising knowledge and joy. His cries for release were ignored, and the men rowed on, blind to temptation. Beyond the sirens lay a narrow strait, cliffs towering on either side. To starboard lurked Scylla, the six-headed monster, each maw hungry for flesh. As the ship passed, she lunged from her cavern, seizing 6 men at once, their screams cut short in the churning sea. Odysseus, powerless, watched as his friends were torn away. To port, Charybdis stirred, a monstrous whirlpool that swallowed the sea itself. Waves spiraled into her gaping maw, dragging ships to ruin. Odysseus steered desperately, keeping the vessel just beyond her pole. The men clung to oars and timbers, their hearts racing as they barely escaped death. Exhausted, the men reached the green pastures of Thrinacia, island of Helios, the sun god. Cattle with golden hides grazed under radiant light, their beauty unnatural and sacred. Odysseus, recalling Tiresias's warning, commanded his men to avoid the herds. But hunger gnawed at them, and defiance brewed in their weary hearts. Storm winds trapped the men upon the island for weeks. Supplies dwindled, and despair grew sharp as blades. One night, while Odysseus slept, his men whispered of their hunger. "Better to die at sea than starve on land," they murmured, and with trembling hands they slaughtered the cattle of Helios. The smell of roasting flesh filled the air like a curse. Helios saw all from his chariot of light. Enraged, he went to Zeus and demanded vengeance. "If justice is denied, I shall drive my son down into Hades forever," he thundered. Zeus, king of the gods, raised his hand in solemn judgment, promising retribution upon the disobedient crew. Once they set sail, the skies blackened and thunder roared. A bolt of lightning split the mast, fire engulfing the ship, and waves devoured the wreck. One by one, Odysseus's men vanished beneath the sea, their cries swallowed by the storm. Alone, Clinging to a fragment of timber, Odysseus was cast adrift upon endless waters. For 9 days, Odysseus drifted upon broken wood, battered by sea and sun. His body weakened, but his spirit clung to life. Waves carried him past Charybdis once more, her whirlpool roaring beneath him, yet fate spared him. At last, the current bore him to an unfamiliar shore, where he collapsed upon the sand, alone in body and soul. The waves cast Odysseus upon the lush island of Ogygia, where fragrant forests and crystal springs shimmered in eternal beauty. There dwelt Calypso, the nymph of enchantment, radiant as the dawn. She found the broken hero upon the sand, tended his wounds, and carried him to her cave of blossoms and song. In her grotto, Calypso wove at her loom, singing melodies that softened sorrow. She offered Odysseus a gift no mortal could refuse: immortality at her side, eternal youth and love. Yet though his body healed, his heart remained chained to Ithaca. Nights passed with Calypso's embrace, but every dawn he gazed out to sea, longing for Penelope. For 7 long years Odysseus lingered on Ogygia. His hair grew silver at the edges, his eyes hollow with longing. Calypso's love became both balm and prison, her island both paradise and cage. Each day he walked the shore, carving rafts of driftwood only to watch them rot away. His soul burned for home. Upon Olympus, Athena pitied Odysseus. She spoke before Zeus, pleading for his release. Is it just that the wisest of men should waste away while his kingdom falters and his queen weeps? The gods murmured, and Zeus nodded, sending Hermes to command Calypso to let her mortal love depart. When Hermes descended to Ogygia, his winged sandals bright, Calypso's heart broke at his words. She railed against the gods' cruelty, against their jealousy of immortal love for mortals. Yet even in her sorrow, she obeyed, her voice heavy as she told Odysseus he was free to go. Tears glistened in her immortal eyes. Calypso, though grieving, helped Odysseus build a great raft from sturdy trees. She filled it with provisions, wine, and garments. Standing upon the shore, she watched as he pushed into the waves. Her song followed him, a melody of love and farewell, drifting over the sea as the raft carried him into fate's hands once more. But Poseidon, returning from distant lands, saw Odysseus upon the open sea. Fury reignited in his heart. With his trident, he summoned storms, towering waves, and thunder to destroy the wanderer once and for all. Odysseus clung to the raft as it shattered beneath him, praying for Athena's unseen hand. From the depths, the sea goddess Ino took pity. She rose with a shining veil, casting it to Odysseus. "Wear this, and the sea will not claim you," she whispered. With desperate faith, he wrapped himself in her gift and plunged into the waters, abandoning the wreck. The waves bore him, half drowned, toward unknown shores. At last, broken and gasping, Odysseus washed ashore upon Phaeacia, land of seafarers blessed by the gods. Naked and weary, he lay hidden in reeds until dawn. The laughter of maidens reached his ears. Nausicaa, princess of the Phaeacias, had come with her handmaids to wash their garments by the river's edge. Fate stirred anew. When the ball of the maidens rolled near, Odysseus emerged, covering himself with branches, his voice humble and pleading. The girls shrieked, but Nausicaa alone stood calm, her eyes bright with compassion. She offered him garments and guidance, leading him toward her father's palace. Hope flickered once more in Odysseus's weary heart. Guided by Nausicaa, Odysseus came to the shining palace of King Alcinous, where golden walls gleamed and bronze doors shone with heavenly light. The halls rang with music, and servants moved like shadows of grace. Odysseus, cloaked in mist by Athena's hand, entered unseen until the goddess willed his presence revealed. Falling at the feet of Queen Arete, Odysseus clasped her knees, humbling himself. "Grant me passage to my home, noble queen, for sorrow weighs upon me heavier than the sea." The court fell silent, marveling at his words and dignity. Arete's eyes softened, and Alcinous promised safety to the weary guest. That night, a feast was laid, with roasted meats, honeyed wine, and songs of the bard Demodocus, whose voice carried the tales of Troy. Odysseus's heart trembled at the songs of the war he had fought, and silent tears rolled down his face, hidden behind his cloak. Few noticed, but the king saw. To honor their guest, the Phaeacians held games of strength and speed. Athletes hurled discus and javelin, raced upon the sand, and wrestled with joy. When Odysseus was mocked for refusing, he rose, cast a discus farther than any man, and silenced their doubt. His strength returned with pride. The young men and women of Phaeacia performed a dance of such beauty that Odysseus felt for a moment as if he had entered Olympus itself. Their feet moved like waves across the sand, their hands weaving patterns of joy and grace. Music rose with lyres and flutes, filling the night with wonder. Demodocus lifted his lyre again, singing of the wooden horse, of Troy's downfall, and of the cunning hero who led the Greeks to victory. At last, Odysseus could not hide his tears. He wept openly, burying his face in his cloak, until the king asked gently, "Stranger, who are you, that you grieve at such a song?" With heavy breath, Odysseus lifted his cloak. "I am Odysseus of Ithaca, son of Laertes, breaker of cities, cursed by the gods to wander. The tale you sing is mine, and my heart can bear its silence no longer." Murmurs rippled through the hall as the hero's true name was spoken. And so Odysseus began his long tale, of the Cicones, of the lotus eaters, of the Cyclops blinded, of Aeolus's winds and the Laestrygonian slaughter, of Circe's island and the descent to Hades, of sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, of the cattle of the sun and of Calypso's embrace. The Phaeacians listened, enraptured. When Odysseus finished, the hall was still, heavy with awe. Alcinous rose, placing his hand upon the hero's shoulder. "You shall return to Ithaca, for no guest under my roof shall be left wanting." He called for the finest ship, swift as the wind, and filled it with treasure to honor the wanderer's trials. At dawn, Odysseus boarded the Phaeacian ship, its prow shaped like a bird of the sea. Sailors rowed in silence, carrying him upon calm waters. For the first time in years, he allowed sleep to take him without fear, trusting the oaths of his hosts. The waves bore him ever closer to home. The Phaeacians left Odysseus sleeping upon the sand, treasures piled beside him. When he awoke, the island lay shrouded in morning mist. At first he knew not where he was, for Athena had veiled the land. But as he touched the soil, he felt the pulse of home, and tears fell upon the earth of Ithaca. From the fog emerged a shepherd boy, yet it was Athena in disguise. She listened to Odysseus's cautious words, testing him as always. When his cunning proved sharp, she shed her guise, revealing her divine form. "Clever Odysseus, you have returned at last, but beware, the halls of your home crawl with greedy suitors." Athena touched Odysseus with her wand, and his strong limbs shrank, his skin withered, his garments became rags. In the place of the hero now stood a bent beggar, staff in hand, eyes glimmering with hidden fire. Thus disguised, he would enter his own halls unknown. Odysseus sought refuge in the humble hut of Eumaeus, the swineherd. The man, poor but faithful, welcomed the beggar with bread and kindness, speaking bitterly of the suitors who wasted his master's wealth. Odysseus's heart swelled with secret gratitude, yet he hid his name still. That night, Odysseus tested Eumaeus's generosity, pretending to speak of hardships. The swineherd, though poor, gave him his cloak against the cold. Moved, Odysseus thought, "Such loyalty will be rewarded when the day of reckoning comes." Meanwhile, Athena guided Telemachus back from his journey abroad. Avoiding the suitors' ambush, he sailed into Ithaca by night and hastened to Eumaeus's hut. There, father and son would meet after long years, though at first the truth remained hidden. When the moment was ripe, Athena restored Odysseus's form. His rags fell away, his stature grew tall, and his face shone like a king returned. Telemachus gasped, thinking him a god, but Odysseus clasped his shoulders. "I am your father, come home at last." Tears and embraces sealed their reunion. Father and son sat together by the fire, whispering plans. They would move carefully, hiding Odysseus's identity until the moment of vengeance. "Courage, my son," Odysseus said. "Soon we shall cleanse our halls of those who dishonor us." Telemachus nodded, fire burning in his heart. Odysseus, once more in beggar's rags, walked toward his own palace. Dogs barked, servants murmured, and strangers stared at the ragged figure who approached. None knew the king had come home. The suitors laughed cruelly when they saw him, blind to the storm that brewed within his eyes. Within the halls, Penelope sat weaving, her beauty undimmed by sorrow. Though the suitors pressed her daily, she remained steadfast, her heart secretly yearning for the husband she believed lost. Unseen, Odysseus gazed upon her from afar, his heart aching with love and vengeance. Odysseus, still in rags, entered his own hall. The suitors feasted loudly, mocking him with cruel laughter, tossing scraps at his feet. Yet he bore their insults in silence, watching, memorizing each face, and waiting for the hour when justice would fall. At the palace gates lay Argos, the old hunting dog who had waited 20 years. As Odysseus approached, Argos lifted his weary head, wagged his tail once, and recognized his master. Then, at peace, he closed his eyes and died. Odysseus wept silently, unseen by all. Penelope, kind even to strangers, summoned the beggar. She asked of his travels, and he spoke of Odysseus as though he were a traveler he had once met, praising his nobility. Her heart stirred with sorrow and faint hope, though she did not yet know the truth. That night, Penelope, weary of deceit, announced before the suitors, "Tomorrow I shall wed the man who can string Odysseus's bow and send an arrow through 12 axe heads in a line." The hall fell into eager uproar, none guessing the trap fate had set. The next day, the great bow of Odysseus was brought forth, heavy and mighty. One by one, the suitors tried to string it, grunting, sweating, and failing. Their laughter turned uneasy, their boasts empty. The beggar sat in silence, watching. When Odysseus asked for the bow, the suitors jeered, roaring with laughter. "Shall the ragged beggar try where warriors failed?" Penelope silenced them, insisting he be allowed his chance. They sneered, but gave way, mocking him still. With calm hands, Odysseus lifted the bow. As effortlessly as a skilled harpist tightens a string, he bent and strung it in one motion. The twang of the bowstring rang like thunder in the hall. A hush fell, and fear crept into the hearts of the suitors. Odysseus set an arrow to the string, drew it back, and sent it whistling clean through all 12 axe heads. The arrow struck true, and the hall shook with silence. At last he spoke. "The contest is ended. The time of reckoning has come." Odysseus cast off his rags, standing revealed in his full strength, eyes blazing. With Telemachus, Eumaeus, and loyal servants at his side, he loosed arrow after arrow. Suitors fell screaming, blood staining the floor, wine cups shattering. The long-awaited vengeance had begun. When the last suitor fell, silence reigned. Bodies lay strewn, torches smoked, and the air was heavy with death. Odysseus stood amid the ruin of his hall, chest heaving, bow still in hand. Justice had returned to Ithaca, though the blood of vengeance was thick upon the earth. Odysseus ordered the servants to cleanse the hall of blood and death. The corpses of the suitors were dragged out, fires lit, and the stench of slaughter washed away with water and smoke. Yet though the hall shone again, its silence still echoed with ghosts. Eurycleia, the old nurse who had raised Odysseus, entered trembling. When she saw the suitors fallen and her master standing alive, she cried out in joy. But Odysseus hushed her, warning, "Not yet, for vengeance is not complete, and secrecy must remain." Penelope, hearing rumors of slaughter, descended from her chambers. She saw the stranger still, and though told he was Odysseus, her heart doubted, for years had taught her caution, and hope was a cruel blade. She remained distant, testing the truth. Penelope spoke with quiet cunning. "If you are truly Odysseus, describe to me our marriage bed." Odysseus's eyes lit with fire. "Woman, who has moved my bed? No mortal could, for I built it around a living olive tree, and its root is the heart of our chamber." At last Penelope's doubts dissolved. She ran into his arms, and husband and wife embraced, tears flowing for 20 years of sorrow and longing. The palace walls seemed to breathe again with life as love returned to Ithaca. All night they lay together, speaking of past years, of battles and wanderings, of dreams and pain. Time itself seemed to pause, allowing them the sweetness of words and the warmth of touch. The gods had tested them, but love had endured. Yet even in joy, danger lingered. The shades of the slain suitors stirred in Hades, whispering to the gods of their deaths. Some among the families of Ithaca plotted revenge, gathering arms to strike Odysseus down. The struggle was not yet ended. At dawn, Odysseus rose, preparing to visit his father Laertes. Penelope watched him go, her eyes filled with pride and lingering fear. Ithaca had her king once more, but peace must still be fought for. Odysseus found his aged father tending a grove, frail yet still strong of spirit. When he revealed himself, Laertes wept, embracing his son as though life had been returned to him. Generations of Ithaca's line stood together once more. When the avengers of the suitors came with spears, battle loomed. But Athena descended, commanding peace. The people laid down their arms, and Odysseus, Penelope, Telemachus, and Laertes stood united. Thus ended the wanderings of Odysseus, with Ithaca restored in harmony. The island of Ithaca, once shadowed by grief, stirred with new life. Farmers tilled their fields, shepherds sang to their flocks, and the sea shimmered in calm harmony. The people whispered of their king's return, half in awe, half in disbelief, yet all felt hope restored. Odysseus gathered his people in a great feast. Wine flowed, meat roasted, and songs rose in the hall once stained with blood. Neighbors embraced, wounds were forgiven, and the king's voice carried strength and gentleness alike, binding his people with unity. Telemachus, once a boy overshadowed by absence, now stood as a man beside his father. Odysseus placed his hand upon his son's shoulder, speaking of duty and wisdom. "One day you shall lead this land. Rule it with justice, not with pride." Though Odysseus was the hero of war, Penelope was the queen of endurance. Her cleverness, patience, and unyielding heart had preserved the kingdom through 20 years. The people honored her not as a shadow of her husband, but as the soul of Ithaca itself. In the orchard, Odysseus often walked with Laertes, recalling the days of youth and wisdom of age. Together they spoke of legacy, of seasons turning, and of the land that had nourished their bloodline. The king honored the father who had waited so long. Poets and bards came to Ithaca, eager to sing the tale of the man of many turns. Odysseus listened as his own story became legend, his deeds carried on the wings of song. In their verses, his struggles and triumphs would live forever. Often, Odysseus stood by the shore, gazing at the endless horizon. The waves whispered of journeys past, of storms survived and loves lost. Yet no longing stirred in him now, for the sea had taken enough, and his heart belonged to Ithaca. One evening, Athena appeared once more, radiant and serene. "My cunning mortal, your trials are done. You have endured what few could bear. Now live not as wanderer, but as king, husband, and father." She vanished into starlight, leaving him blessed with peace. Years passed, and Odysseus grew old. His beard whitened, his hands slowed, yet his eyes still burned with wisdom. He taught his son, cherished his wife, and ruled his people with fairness. His life became not only war and wandering, but peace and legacy. And so the tale of Odysseus came to rest, not only in Ithaca, but across the world. From hearth to hearth, from bard to bard, his name was spoken as the man of twists and turns, who braved gods and monsters and returned at last to love and home. His story became eternal, lulling generations into dreams.